Suicide is, all said and done, is a very sensitive matter.
Already this big atmosphere about we shouldn't talk about suicide.
Manage various complicated emotions, or they're frustrated with so many things, or many other reasons.
Making sure that the environment is supportive.
We should walk up to them and say, is everything okay, right?
Open that door for conversation at least.
Hello everyone, welcome to our conversation on suicide and awareness towards suicide. We are conducting this discussion on the occasion of World Suicide Prevention Day, which happens on the 10th of September every year. This year's Suicide Prevention Day is specially marked to understand and change the narratives towards suicide. And I feel it is very important because the narrative in and around suicide matters a lot, and that decides how we approach suicide as a concept. For this conversation, I have with me Dr. Paras and I am Dr. Sudarshan. We both work in the field of mental health. We provide consultations for people who require mental health assistance. And today we are going to have conversation on how to understand suicide as a concept and what are the narratives that goes in and around suicide. So welcome Dr. Paras. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So how do you think we can understand this concept? Why does narrative around suicide matter so much?
No, I think this year's theme is something which is very close to my heart. My own organization's tagline is changing the narrative. So when it comes to any kind of conversation around mental health, there is already a pre-existing conversation or a pre-existing narrative which is there. And usually when it comes to mental health itself, the narrative is one which is around stigma, shame, secrecy. We should not talk about it. And when it comes to suicide, it becomes even more shameful.
Right.
So there is already this big atmosphere about we shouldn't talk about suicide. But I'm sure you would have seen the WHO report that came out a few years ago, which mentioned that India is the highest, number of suicides in the world.
It stands first in the world, right?
And first in the world, not just by absolute numbers, but also the ratio of suicides to the overall population. So absolute numbers also highest, and rate of suicides per 1 lakh people is also the highest.
Yeah.
Although our own Indian data from National Crime Records Bureau is lesser than that, it is still far higher than many countries which is talked about it. And each year we talk about how it is a big issue, but we see this disturbing trend also of suicides continuing to be on the rise. And I think now in a post-pandemic world, it has become even more much of a problem. So I think it is extremely important for us to first examine what the conversations are around suicide in our country.
True.
And then talk about how they could be furthering the problem or maintaining the problem as it is, which is why I think it's a very important thing for us to question and then try to change this narrative.
Yeah, I completely agree. Suicide attracts a lot more stigma than anything else because there is an extremity in reactions, right? Either people ridicule it,
yes,
and belittle the other person who thinks on those lines, or they make it too serious and too secret that nobody would want to even talk about.
Absolutely.
So this extremity is something that is very counterproductive on one side, and I think the other aspect is also how people perceive suicide itself, and I think that's what this year's tagline is all about. And I strongly feel that focusing on the narrative is absolutely important because that also creates a good sense of awareness, and it tries to burst the myths and misconceptions around suicide. So I think the first thing that maybe we can start conversating is, what do you think is a common misunderstanding or a common conception towards suicide itself?
I think one thing that people always get it wrong is that, it's the event of suicide which we have to prevent. And we think that if somehow we are able to stop the person from doing the act, then that is the
Preventing from the attempt.
preventing from the attempt itself. So I see most of the conversation is around the attempt itself, and I always say that suicide is a process, not an event.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that is probably the last stage.
Yes.
I mean, maybe that's the only visible thing that somebody is attempting. But like you said, there is so much that happens.
That is happening before that. Yeah, and the person usually, when they have reached that stage, have already considered so many different things. They've tried. Many of them have tried mental health, services like medicines. Many of them have been hospitalized in the past, sometimes even with failed attempts.
Correct.
Right, and they have been in counseling. They have been in therapy. So that's one of the things that people forget. That a lot of times suicide is not just something that happens out of the blue. There is a history. There is a background to this person having had challenges in the past. And I think the second myth which I always come across is that every suicide is not about mental health. So many suicides are not to do with mental health. It could be related to financial reasons,
or relationship issues.
It could be personal or professional failures. I mean, you can argue that all of them are part of mental health also, but it's not that every person...
And in that way, nothing can be delinked from mental health.
Correct. But it's not that this person had a major depressive disorder and they were not treated on time, they were not given medicine, or that if you diagnose and treat major depressive disorder, then all suicides will become preventable. So I think that one myth which is there, which
on the same lines,
on
the same lines, what I also, I feel which is so very important for us to pay attention is that a lot of people think suicide is an impulsive reaction.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you were saying that how the act is not the thing that we should be focusing on, but there is so much of process that goes in. I think one thing that we need to set the narrative right is suicide is definitely not an impulsive action, right? I mean, that is just one form.
Correct.
Somebody being very impulsive, maybe because they can't control their anger, or they can't manage various complicated emotions, or they're frustrated with so many things, or many other reasons. There might be a reaction towards harming themselves.
Correct. But it's not suicidal.
Exactly. That is not suicide in first place. And secondly, it might lead to death eventually.
Correct.
But the idea or the concept of suicide is so different, and the impulsive behavior is so very different.
Correct. And that's why this whole framing of don't take the wrong step, or don't do it in one bad day or one bad moment. It's never one bad day or one bad moment that the person has made. And as you said, very often the event that has caused them to try to hurt themselves might be very, very sudden, and the reaction to it may also be very sudden. But very often it is because of the accidental injury that happens to the person while trying to attempt to hurt or harm themselves that leads to some of these suicides. So it's definitely not some impulsive act or some act where one day the person woke up and they did that, and there was no sign whatsoever before that.